in some way. And if I don't spend it, then that's great. It's not like I want to spend it. Helicopter. So lesson number one, the biggest mistake that new real estate investors are making is they are not appropriately preparing for closing costs. Another way to say this is they're underestimating how much they think it's going to take to close the deal outside of their initial equity. Let's run through a quick example. $100,000 house, the bank's giving me 80, I got to pay 20. Well, not so fast, because depending on where you live, there can be a plethora of other charges that you're not expecting that are called closing costs. Let's run through a list of some basic closing costs. Number one, an appraisal can cost you anywhere from $500 for a house, or I have a buddy who just bought a storage facility. I think he bought it for $8 million. It was 10 locations. They charged him $5,000 per location. His appraisal was 50 grand. I know it's an $8 million deal. I know you're a beginner. It's fine, but I just want to tell you these things can add up. The next is inspection. Always, 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 please get your house physically inspected by a professional. Understand what is wrong with the building. Almost every building has something that's wrong with it. It doesn't mean that everything has to be fixed on it, but you always want to know what's wrong with it and if anything is there that does need to be fixed. That can cost you anywhere from $400 to $2,000 depending on the property type. Next up, transfer taxes. Normally this isn't a lot of money. Some cases it's 18 bucks, whatever, not much. Title insurance. If you don't know what the title to a property is, essentially the piece of paper that says you own this, who owns this, and who has owned it in the past. So title insurance is the title company will give insurance that the property you're buying is free and clear of any title issues. Say the prior owner to the house was inherited by a brother and a sister, and let's say they hated each other. Let's say the sister came to you and said, hey, I'm gonna sell you this house. Sure, I'll sign off, you give me the money. And the brother didn't know about it. That may happen. And essentially in that process, the title company is saying, I'm gonna deliver to you a property where you don't have to worry about issues like that. In some states like Florida, there's a mortgage tax, and these can be sometimes like from 0.5%, I think up to 1% of the loan. So if you borrow $1 million, that can be a $10,000 mortgage tax. So going into a deal, how much do I estimate for closing costs? My general rule of thumb is I'll estimate 3% of the purchase price for my closing costs. So if I'm going to buy $1 million property, I would slate $30,000 for closing costs, okay? Now in the capital stack, it'd be I buy the property for $1 million, I get a bank loan for $800,000, I have to put in $200,000 of equity, plus I need $30,000 of closing costs. So my total down payment would be $230,000. Don't get lower just because you're buying the house for really cheap. So I would always use a minimum of $5,000 or 3%, whichever is greater. The second biggest mistake that I see new investors making is they don't have any operating capital and they don't have any reserves. I talk about this in my second book, Skip the Flip, 3 Keys to Any Deal. If you want to listen to that book for free, don't tell other people. I just put that book up for free on my YouTube. There's the link, absolutely free. So operating capital is essentially money that sits in your bank account so that you can pay your mortgage, you can pay your utilities, you can pay your pest control, your lawn care, whatever, if your tenants move out. Sometimes in business, you have a down month. Not every single month in business is flat, and that's the same for real estate. If you have a tenant who moves out, you might not have rent for that month. And let's say you need to do some repairs, so maybe you don't have rent for 2 months. You don't want to be paying money out of pocket every time that a tenant moves out. That's why you have operating capital, so that when a tenant moves out, you're already prepared. What I do, and what I would recommend you do, is I use 2 months of expenses, of all my expenses. 2 months of property taxes, 2 months of... Well, that's the bad thing about recording videos outside, is that my camera overheated and I didn't get to finish what I was saying. So to wrap up point number 2 about not having any operating capital, my point is that most new investors go into an investment and pull as much money out of it as they can, have that operating capital, 2 months of operating capital, keep that in the bank account. So if you had a rental house, in between the mortgage and property taxes and property management and repairs and maintenance and everything, if that was $1,500 a month, I would take 2 months of that and I would have $3,000 sitting in an account. And every time my account went over $3,000 at the end of a month, I would pull that money out. So if I ended the month at $3,700, I'd pull $700 out. If I ended the month at $3,200, I would only pull $200 out. If I ended the month at, let's say, $2,500, I wouldn't pull any money out, and I would wait till the following month for that get back to the $3,000 level, and then I would start to pull money back out after that. And so that's how I talk to most of my students about operating capital, and that's how I think that you should do it as well. The third biggest mistake that I see new investors making is whenever they're going into a deal that maybe needs a little bit of work, let's say some cosmetic updates, renovating the exterior of a property, whatever it is not preparing to spend as much money as something's actually gonna cost. Oh, I'm gonna get a new kitchen. Surely I could get a new kitchen for $15,000, and all of a sudden at the end of the day, you're spending $25,000, $30,000 on a new kitchen. Before you actually go into any sort of renovation project, I want you to get 3 contractors to come out and to bid the job for you, okay? One thing that you need to make very sure of is that all 3 contractors bid on the exact same thing. So you can build what you call as a request for quote, or RFQ. And essentially what this is whenever you want to get a project done, you need to build a list of everything that you want done. I wouldn't just write, I want a new kitchen, how much is it? I would say, I want a new kitchen, I want the cabinets here, this kind of countertop. You can serve that to every single contractor of the 3 that come out there. Now you're gonna get 3 contractors, you want 3 prices on that work, and what you want to do is you don't just want to immediately select the lowest price one. You want to understand the differences in prices. Let's say one contractor bid us $20,000, another contractor bid us $22,000, and then the third contractor bid us $35,000, right? So obviously there's a big gap there. Of course, our first inclination is gonna go, well, I'm gonna go with the $20,000 one. What you wanna do is you wanna look and see what's all included between the different ones, and you wanna ask the guy who bid you the highest price, why is your price so high? I have other people coming in here. And you can generally learn something from that, right? But the point being is that you're probably not gonna end up going with that guy unless he included, you know, demolition or dumpsters or something the other guys didn't, and now you need to know, wow, my price really is gonna be $35,000. I would generally look at the range of the quotes that were closest together. The 22,500. Even if you went with the guy at 20,000, I would plan to spend the 22,500, however much the highest of those general ranges is. That would be my budget for the project, okay? Now, you've selected a budget, you've got a contractor. What we also need to talk about is setting aside what I'll call as reserves or contingencies. I really like to think of them as contingencies because something is always gonna be happening that you weren't expecting, right? Like I'll give you an example on a construction project that I did in Florida. As we were digging out the footers for these new buildings, the guy digging out the footers, digging the holes to pour the beam down into, they ran into rock. We are 2 miles away from the beach, sandy dirt. You're not expecting to hit rock, but we hit rock, and that ended up costing me $25,000 just to deal with the rocks that were there that we weren't expecting to be there. And so the contingency should be 10% of the project. It's not like I want to spend that money, but I should be prepared to spend that money because there's a chance that prices will increase, labor will be more than I thought, I run into rocks, something's gonna happen. Always have the cash available to do that, because if you go into a project, you say, hey, we're gonna do this renovation, I'm using every last dollar that I have, every last dollar I have access to. Well, what happens whenever you do get hit with that $10,000 overrun budget? How are you gonna pay for it? How are you gonna finish that project, right? Those are the 3 biggest mistakes that I see new investors making. Number 1, underestimating closing costs. Number 2, not having the appropriate amount of operating capital and abusing that system. And number 3, not having the proper contingency/reserves on construction projects and just not getting those bid in the correct way. I hope you guys found this video valuable, and do me a favor, if you learned something, share it with a friend, subscribe to the channel, like the video. I would really appreciate it. Be great. I hope I can help you on your journey to financial freedom. Check out some other videos on the channel.